I reflect back on it and I wish that I had taken a little bit of time to really like understand what had happened and like really feel good about what had happened, but I never let myself have that break. I just kept going because the well needed to get drilled. We needed to get all of our vendors paid. We needed to hire people. We needed to do all these things. And so I never stopped, just go, 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 go. And in retrospect, I wish I'd given myself just a little bit of like leeway, like a little grace to have that like moment of, wow, look what you did. This is amazing.
Hi, I'm Courtney Gumbleton, and welcome to the Founders Club podcast, the show where you'll hear the incredible stories of the unapologetically ambitious women founders who are redefining the wild world of entrepreneurship in Texas. Today, we have a special guest, Laura Pommer, the CEO of EnergyFunders, an online platform for investing in oil and gas and Bitcoin mines. Hailing from Boulder, Colorado, Laura is a trained geologist and has an extensive background in oil and gas. As a female leader in a male-dominated industry, she's especially passionate about mentoring and recruiting more young women into the industry. She has an incredible story to share with us. Welcome, Laura.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good. We were just talking about lunch, which was delicious.
That's right. We went to the Bearded Lady, and you got to try the famous tomato soup.
It was so good. It was delicious. I still want to know what they put in it to get that little kick at the end.
So Shannon, we want to know. So thanks for flying in all the way from Houston today.
Yeah, no
just
problem.
To meet with me and, of course, grab some tomato soup.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, not a problem. It was better than driving. So
absolutely, especially since it's raining today.
Yes, I did not want to get stuck in traffic.
So I know a little bit about your story, and I learned even more during lunch. So I cannot wait to really delve into all of this goodness. So let's start off a little bit with, tell us about your childhood. What kind of kid were you? Were you serious, playful?
Yeah, so I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, born and raised third generation, actually. So we lived less than, it was maybe a 10-minute walk from my parents' house to my grandparents' house. So my brother and I spent most afternoons over at my grandparents' house because, of course, they had the good snacks and the swimming pool and let us watch TV all the time.
The good snacks.
Yeah, the good snacks.
There must have been some fruit snacks involved there.
Oh, yeah. Popsicles, fruit snacks. I think I used to come home from school and I always asked for salt and chocolate.
Ooh.
So my grandma always had Pringles, and I would always have like a Hershey's bar and Pringles for my school snack.
Grandma did it up.
She was the best. Yeah. Yeah. So I was a pretty happy kid, I would say. Weirdly serious and weirdly shy. I think a lot of people, when I tell them now that I was a very, very shy kid all the way through college, that, now I'm totally an extrovert and kind of a pain in the butt. So people are always surprised when they find out that I was actually really shy when I was a little kid. So I was a ballet dancer, spent a lot of time dancing. I went to an arts middle school, which was really cool. And then, in high school, kept dancing and got really into science. And then eventually, of course, went to school for geology, like you mentioned in the intro. So growing up in Boulder was really interesting. It was inspirational for me, of course. I got to spend so much time outside. My grandfather was a naturalist. He was a doctor, but loved being outside, hunted, fished, the whole thing. He would drag me and my brother and my cousins along with him, and we just spent so much time doing that kind of stuff. And then my uncle was a geologist also, and so he kind of inspired me to get out there and try to take a geology class. I actually started I went to CU Boulder for my undergraduate degree. I started as an art major, and then I switched from art to integrative physiology and did all my pre-med classes. And then I added geology as a kind of a last minute thing because my uncle had said, well, you should just try it. You get to hike around and go have fun and all this stuff. So I took geology classes and I loved them. They came really naturally to me, very easily to me. And it was so much nicer than all my pre-med classes because pre-med kids are jerks and they won't share information with you. I got hit by a car when I was biking and I had a concussion and I couldn't go to school for this exam and I had to miss a couple lectures, and the pre-med kids wouldn't share notes with me. And I was totally appalled because my geology friends, we'd just go hiking on the weekends, and they were all concerned about my health and well-being. And
they'd always share their rocks with you.
They do. They love licking rocks too. It's great. That's a joke. We don't actually lick rocks.
So they wouldn't share their notes with you?
No, it was totally rude. And, it just really put me off of the whole pre-med thing. That's too competitive. That's not who I am. I'm a very competitive person, but I like to be surrounded by people who are more supportive than that. Little did I know, eventually, once you get high enough in your career in oil and gas, it's very competitive also, but not like that. It's still a really good community. So anyway, went to CU, finished up the degrees, and then I started working in Denver as a geologist straight out of undergrad. And that was really fun. Kind of young woman in the big city. I was 23-ish when all that was going on. And a couple of my really good friends lived down there too. And so we would have these fabulous ladies' nights where we would go out in downtown Denver and have a really good time. And then I'd roll into work the next day all hungover. It's probably not my best choice, but that was a really fabulous time in my life where I became really close with this really fascinating, solid group of women. And those girls they're my best friends to this day. And
I love that.
Really special. You don't really think of making friends necessarily as you get a little bit older. But one of my very best friends, Emily, I didn't meet her until I was in my mid-20s. And she and I are still besties to this day. And I'm just super excited about it. And now, of course, they had all left Colorado, but now they're all back. And I'm the lone Texan. So...
Yeah, it really never is too late to make friends.
I don't think so. And I think there's sort of a social stigma around making friends as you get older. I noticed when I was married, I recently got divorced last year, but when I was married,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. We'll get to that one. When I was married, we always had friends, the same friends, and we didn't really make new friends. And now I think it's a little easier and a little bit less stigmatized as a single lady going out and making new friends. I have a whole bunch of new friends now, and it's really fun. I love my old friends, but it's still pretty fun to make new friends. So I think it's harder though a little bit to form deep bonds like the ones that I have with my gals back home. But, it's just a time and a place thing, I think. So I don't know.
Yeah. Whether they're old friends or new friends, it's just helpful to have those people in your life,
a community,
that sounding board, the people who can share the wins with you and celebrate you, but they're also there when shit hits the fan.
When you get divorced during coronavirus.
Right. Yeah. More on that shortly. So it's interesting that you started off as an art major because I heard that as a child, you were never really able to color in the lines.
No, I did never colored in the lines. In fact, I would just draw my own lines.
So you were one of those. We're the same age. So do you remember how everybody would, they'd kind of shade the picture and then they would use the crayon to go hard around the edge. Yeah. So where is it where you struggle? Was it the shading or the lines?
In the lines.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I went to an arts focused middle school and studied visual arts at that time. So I'm really into painting and drawing, and it's something I wish I had a little bit more time to devote to. I really love doing that. I took up pottery a couple of years ago and loved that too, but it just didn't stick because it was too much of a time commitment. But I just never really, I always had more vision for whatever was on the page than what was actually there. So I'd just add my own kind of twist to it. So yeah,
well, I love that.
Not so good at that. Yeah, exactly. You see something and you're like, well, it would be better if we added this, maybe put some flowers over here, and we'll add this character over here. And I remember my mom always told me this story when I was a kid. I have always worn overalls. I still always wear overalls. They're the best clothing item. I would always put rocks and crayons in all the pockets of my overalls. And so whenever she did the laundry, I don't know why she didn't figure this out after the first couple times, but whenever she did the laundry, she'd pull my overalls out of the laundry machine and there would just be rocks and melted crayons all over all the laundry.
Well, being a mother, I'm guessing she probably had 1,000 other things on her mind. She was a
little busy. Yeah. Between me and my brother, I'm sure she was very, very busy.
Man, wow, that's so fun. So when you were a kid, did anybody ever give you a rock tumbler for Christmas?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. And what's really
That's
funny,
like the quintessential geology kid. Oh, yeah.
Totally. So
those things are noisy.
They're really loud. We did it at my grandpa's house. We, of course, again, the fun grandparents.
Yeah, really.
All that bad stuff over there. Mom's like, no, get out of here. So my brother and I actually both ended up being geologists.
Wow.
Yeah. So my brother actually has his postdoctorate degree in geology. He's a very smart cookie. He married a woman who is a kick-ass lady. She's also a geologist. She has a PhD from Colorado School of Mines, which is like...
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And she just got her first like big full-time job at BP in Denver.
Oh, cool.
So she's wonderful. She's a working mom. They just had their first baby, Nyla. My little niece is 6 months old. But it's really been intense.
And she's precious. I saw a picture on your Instagram. Oh my gosh.
She's cute baby.
I love cute babies.
I know. She's got the big old cheeks. But it's been really impressive to watch my sister-in-law because she's, in her early 30s. She just had their first child. She's working full-time as a geologist at this big oil company. And man, she is crushing it. Of course, it's filled with, heartache and tears, and it's really, really hard. But I'm so proud of her for even being able to make it through this whole time. And the job that she's doing is not easy. It's operations. So she's constantly on call, breastfeeding this baby, taking care of their house. It's amazing. And of course, my brother, he's pulled his act together too, and he's been super supportive. And actually, Ranya's coming down. We're going to San Antonio this weekend to hang out and have a girls' weekend.
Oh, that's so fun.
My baby bro's taking care of their baby.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Well, as long as he doesn't call it babysitting. Remember how women are always like, it's not babysitting when it's your baby.
Exactly. This is just taking care of your child.
So it sounds like growing up in Colorado definitely led to your path in geology. Mm-hmm. Did you spend a lot of time hiking and outdoors with your family?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. All the time. We were always outside. What's funny about becoming a geologist is that in school, they always tell you that, you get to go on all these field trips and stuff. There's a thing called field camp where you go out in the wilderness for 6 weeks and you do geologic mapping and go to all these really beautiful sites. And then when you start your job as a real geologist after school, there's no hiking. They lied. You're just chained to a desk working at a computer. So it's really funny because geologists typically are really outdoorsy people. We love being outside. We're all environmentalists. A lot of us end up working in oil and gas, and I think it's important that geologists are environmentalists because oil and gas would look a lot different if we didn't have people who cared about the earth doing what they're doing. But it's so funny because you just have all these people who are super outdoorsy sitting at desks, wearing their hiking boots, just really sad looking. But yeah, we spent a ton of time outside. It was great. Colorado's a wonderful place. Texas is great too. I just... being from Colorado and having that upbringing, I feel really lucky. And then, of course, I've gotten to travel quite a bit because of being a geologist. So it's been really good.
So speaking about traveling, you went backpacking around the world with your best friend, right?
I did.
Tell us about it.
You did your due diligence. I love it. Courtney and I went... Gosh.
Not me. It's another Courtney.
Courtney Lee. We call her G. Which I don't even know where that came from. But anyway, we graduated college. We both started working right out of school. We worked for about 2.5 years, and both of us had saved enough money. We'd always wanted to do this. We met in college. We were like, okay, after college, we're going to travel.
So how old were you? Early 20s?
24.
Okay, got it.
My 20, I think it was right before or right after my 25th birthday. So
got it.
Mid-20s. Saved enough money to spend 5-6 months traveling around the world. It was amazing. We visited 13 countries. And I mean, that was I think probably one of the single most important things that I've ever done. It was amazing. I learned so much about different cultures, different people, forming communities, how to be a human in the world. And then, of course, a lot of things about myself, too. And Court and I, of course, we've been super close ever since and even before that. But we want to do a round the world round 2.
Ooh, I love that.
I know. So we're trying to figure out the right timing for it. I mean, neither of us really can afford to take 6 months off right now, but someday we're going to go and do the exact same trip, but actually spend money on it instead of spending $4 a night on creepy Airbnbs.
It's the luxury version.
Yeah, we're going to do the nice version. So it was amazing.
Tell us about a few of the frugal spends. I mean, did you spend,
oh my gosh,
$20 at a hostel or?
Yeah, no, less than that. It was crazy. So hopefully mom's not going to listen to this. I'm sure she will. She already knows all these stories anyway. We just didn't tell her till after we got back. There was one night in India in Delhi, and we decided, it was sort of toward the end of our trip, and we kind of had started to run out of money a little bit. So we had this expectation that India would be very similar to Southeast Asia. And in Southeast Asia, especially like Thailand, Vietnam, it's really cheap. When we were traveling, it was very, very cheap to stay in very nice places. We stayed in this beautiful hotel, actually, in, maybe not Phuket, Thailand, but another island in Thailand. And it was $20 a night. And we had a whole villa to ourselves.
Wow.
It was amazing. We were in off season, but it was still incredible. So then we get to India and we have this totally false expectation that Indian prices will be the same as prices in Southeast Asia, when realistically Indian prices, they're much more Western. So it was closer to American prices. And so we get there and we're at the end of our trip and we're running out of money. And we're like, well, we only have $5 a night that we can afford to stay. And we ended up staying in this place. I mean, I don't know how we did it. When you're older and you look back at it and you're like, oh, gross. I stayed there. It was...
I probably would have just stayed awake.
Yeah, I know. It was so bad. I don't think we slept that night. Rolling brownouts all over the place too was terrible. But the two things I remember most from that night were the walls were crumbling. They were rotting. The walls were falling down. And there was this sad pile of kittens outside the door. They were living, but they were all mewing and hungry, and they were right outside the door. And I just remember being so depressed by these sad baby kitties that were right outside our door. It was a very odd evening. Yeah. And then, of course, Courtney and I both ended up with food poisoning days later and spent most of our trip in India very sick. So I have been back to India subsequent to that trip. And I will say it was a much better experience when you're not spending $4 a night on hostels.
Well, still, I mean, the fact that you guys were able to stretch your savings for 6 months, that's pretty impressive.
It was really cool. We definitely did shoestring budget. But a lot of those places, the good food is the street food. And so especially in Singapore has some of the best street food I've ever had. And it's very clean there. So it was really fun. I experienced the full gamut of food and qualities of life, and it was a really fabulous time in my life. I really had a mind expanding experience.
What was it like being two single women traveling internationally?
It was pretty tough, actually. We were young and stupid, of course.
Young and dumb.
Young and dumb. Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't going to say that.
I feel comfortable saying that. It was great. I was glad we were together, of course. We were supposed to go to North Africa, but it was right before Arab Spring. And so there was a lot of tumult in North Africa at that time. And I remember we were in, where were we? Kuala Lumpur, and staying at some hostel, and this woman was sitting there, and we sort of struck up conversation because it was pretty rare to see single females traveling or even pairs of females traveling. And so when we ran into other women, we would always make friends. And so we're chatting with this girl, and she asked about our travels, and we said, our next stop is North Africa. And she said, ooh, I am Moroccan. I'm from Morocco. I would not recommend going there right now as to young women. She said, it's totally dangerous. I won't even, there's a reason I'm not there right now. Mm-hmm. So it was really interesting because, we got a lot of feedback from other women who had traveled, and there was a lot going on at the time, and so we decided to bail on that part of the trip. But otherwise, it was totally safe and fine. There were a couple times in India I didn't feel totally comfortable, but for the most part, we were fine.
Yeah, I heard the same thing because my husband at that same time was in Egypt, and he was saying, "Wow, it is dangerous here right now, and I would not want to be a woman."
No. Yeah.
So what happened after you guys wrapped up the trip and got rid of your food poisoning and came back to the States?
I don't think I ever got rid of that food poisoning.
Still there.
It's seared into my mind forever. So it was fun. After we traveled during our trip, I had applied to graduate school, and I got into the 2 schools that I applied to, and one of them was still in Colorado. It was School of Mines, Colorado School of Mines, and the other one was the University of Texas. I applied for these degree programs, got in, and we were on the beach in Thailand, I think, and I remember being like, I've lived in Colorado for 26 years, 25 years. I need to try something different. Like, I just don't want to get stuck here. A lot of people, are comfortable staying in their hometown. And like I said, I was so shy when I was young, and I had already come out of my box a little bit and was like, you know what? I'm going to change it up. So I decided to go to the University of Texas at Austin, started in the program maybe less than 30 days after we got back from Southeast Asia, and had never been to Texas in my life. Packed up my Subaru with my 2 wiener dogs, my best friend, who did not drive a stick shift, and this was a stick shift. Alora, thank you. We drove from Boulder to Austin, and we got to Austin, and it was I don't know if I've ever been that hot in my entire life.
How hot was it?
It was 115 degrees. And mind you, I had just gotten back from a very, very warm region. It was terrible. And we parked the car. I had an appointment with my advisor at school. My house that I was renting was about a mile away from the department. And I was this, cute little Colorado girl, decided to walk in 115 degree weather from my house to my department. And I arrived at the geology department, and my advisor looked at me and she's like, "Are you stupid?" Totally drenched in sweat, like completely sweaty. It was terrible. So I got a ride back to the house, and Alora none of the power was on in the house. It was a total disaster, like total disaster. But the only thing that was working was the freezer. And so she just parked me in front of the refrigerator with the door open until we figured out where we could go find air conditioning. So Texas was rough on me when I first got here. But since then, we've become friends.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the greatest things you can do is form a friendship with a restaurant owner that has a walk-in freezer because Texas, it just gets so hot. Yeah, I moved here from Wisconsin, so that first couple of summers was just like, how do you guys do this? And
then you kind of get used to it. And now my dad makes unending fun of me because I'm always cold now when I go to Colorado. And he said every single time, without fail, "Do you need a scarf?"
Oh, goodness.
Texas girl. Dad, no, I'm fine. I'll just sit here cold. Yeah.
So how's the program?
The program.
At UT?
Oh my gosh, it's a fabulous program. I ended up, that's basically where all of my Texas friends came from, was my geology program. It was amazing.
You thought I was talking about AA, didn't you?
Maybe. Yeah, it's a really good program.
Is that where you met your...
now ex-husband? That's right.
Yeah.
Luke. Yeah, Luke and I met in our graduate department. We were in the same research group, so it was a classic meet cute. I remember meeting him the first time and being like, "Oh yeah, he's awesome. I really like that person." And he was not quite as convinced about me, which made for a very hilarious first couple of months.
he didn't see you and your 2 weenie dogs and know instantly that you were the one?
No, he has his own wiener dog who he loves very dearly. He's a wiener dog convert for sure. Yeah. Yeah, so Luke and I met there, and then my brother ended up at school there. My sister-in-law ended up at school there. That's how they met, was through that department. Her brother is also a geologist. So we were, it's just like a family affair at this point.
I love that.
Yeah, and then we all ended up basically moving to Houston because that's where most geologists end up in oil and gas.
Right.
And so, because we were in Austin and Houston's the big oil and gas town, we all kind of...
either that or Midland, right?
Exactly. Those are your two options. And I was not going to choose Midland. Though my cousin lives there. He's a geologist and he loves it there. He and his wife really like it. I mean, I haven't ever been. This is actually only my second time in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm a bad Texan. I've been to like 2 places here.
Well, I've never been to Houston.
You
so
haven't?
Never in my life.
Well, here's your open invitation. Come visit anytime.
I will. I'll come see you and your weenie dog.
Come see my weenie dog. Abby's great. She's 15 now. I'm down 1 wiener dog, but I still got the old girl going. And she is just an independent lady.
So let's get back to you graduating and you're starting to get some work experience. Mm-hmm. What was it like?
It was good. It was...
was it what you expected?
Not what I expected at all. No. My first year on the job, oil price was really good. We were running 21 drill rigs in the Piceance Basin, which is in western Colorado. And we were just blowing and going, drilling wells like crazy. And within 4 months, the bottom dropped out of oil price and we dropped all of our rigs. We did not drill any more wells. Well, we drilled some. We were down to 3 or 4 rigs at that point. So that was over a period of 4 months. And so in the beginning, when I very first started, it was a lot of busy work, right? When you're a new grad, they don't really give you the fun stuff to do. They give you the crappy stuff to do. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing operations, and that's really hard too, because you really have to like know yourself and be out there on the rig and like tell these big dudes what to do. And I was still fairly insecure in all of this, trying to figure out how to actually navigate that world. So,
and you're a brand new extrovert.
Exactly. I'm like barely, I was still not an actual extrovert at that point either. I'm like starting to toe the line, like extroverted around friends, but not professionally, right?
Got it.
Yeah. So it was hard. It was really, really hard. And it was hard for me because we were doing these things called geoprogs, which they're not that challenging. It's just very, very detailed work. And if you mess something up, it can have pretty serious problems, right, on the rig. So I was doing a bunch of those and I was bored and, it's not hard. So I figured it out pretty quickly. And I just didn't like what I was doing. And I kind of nobody was really mentoring me, even though I was supposed to have a mentor. And so I just sort of felt like I was floating around. And eventually, after like a year and a half of doing that, I thought, this isn't quite for me. I think if I further my education in geology, I'll get to do the projects I want to go do. And so that's when I decided I really wanted to go get a master's degree. And most geologists who are at, larger oil companies do have master's degrees. It's sort of like an expectation. Engineers aren't necessarily expected to have a master's degree. They all start in the industry way younger than us geologists, but geologists are basically expected to have a master's at a minimum now, if you want to go into the oil and gas industry at least. So I liked the industry enough at that time to want to continue to pursue working in it. I just knew I needed to kind of boost my education to do what I wanted to do. So that's when I decided to apply to school, and then I traveled. And then once I finished graduate school at UT, I started working at a company called Anadarko Petroleum, which I guess parts of it exist, but they got purchased by another big company, Oxy Petroleum, recently. So I worked at Anadarko for 4 years-ish and got very lucky with my teams, my timing. It was a really fun place to work. I had a couple female mentors who were just totally kick-ass. I love those gals, and we still hang out all the time, which is awesome. It's really nice to have those connections, especially in a professional environment. And those women, in particular, Kristen Walker, like, she is how I became a work extrovert. Because she would just straight up boss those boys around. She was amazing. And she knew her stuff. She wasn't afraid to show that she knew her stuff. And kind of watching her was really sort of what led me down this path to, we talked earlier about authenticity and like learning how to be who you are going to be. And like not, I always thought I needed to be really buttoned up and professional. And the deeper I get into my career and like the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think you're happier if you are who you are, number one. And number two, that happiness translates typically into success and the perception of, oh, this is who you are. This is great. Okay, I understand you. You're transparent. Okay, we like what you're doing. You're not obfuscating anything. You're not like overly professional. And I've spent a lot of time being professional, but those days are kind of over now. Now that I'm with EnergyFunders, I kind of get to do what I want, and it's a lot happier for me.
She's a party girl now.
Now it's fun.
Hi, I'm Elise Dickerson, CEO and co-founder of EOSarah Inc. We are hosting a business pitch competition. We're in search of a female-led, Texas-based company with the chops to make millions. The prize? $10,000. Find your application at empowermentpitch.com. That's EMPOWHERMENT pitch.com. Applications close September 16th. Good luck.
So you left that company, joined another one, and then at one point you felt kind of a culture shift away from the industry being person-centered, and so you left.
Correct.
Right?
Well, it's not that I left the industry. I've sort of pivoted in a different direction. So when I was in Anadarko, there was a big shift in the culture there. And it was primarily due to reorganization, and you started to feel less like a human and more like a number. And I don't do well in those sorts of environments. I want everybody to kind of know who I am. And I like community, obviously. I keep saying this word. So it's really important to me to have a corporate culture that reflects that. And I started to feel just sort of like a cog in the machine. And, there's a reason I didn't go work for one of the super majors. So I got frustrated. The culture was changing so much and really quickly that I decided to leave. Yeah, I left Anadarko and I started at a couple of small private equity-backed portfolio companies. So these banks put money together to go invest in small teams that are managing assets. It's just a different financial structure, basically, from a big company or a small company. So I worked with a couple of those, and it was really interesting. It was really fun. Man, I learned a ton because I was the only geologist, right? You're the only one doing this stuff. So talk about having to stand on your own 2 feet. You have one shot to figure this out. You better do it because there's millions of dollars on the line and people's lives, right? So that was a really good move for me. I was really happy with leaving the big company, trying out the small company thing, kind of figured it out. And, at one point found myself unemployed and thinking about what I wanted to do. And I did seriously consider leaving the industry. There's a lot of problems in oil and gas too. I love it. It is a necessary thing for human function at this point. And I really like to be a part of it. I think we have a PR problem, but I also think there are a lot of intrinsic issues with oil and gas, a lot of sexism, a lot of, other isms that happen in the industry that it's not really that pretty. But it is my industry and I've now grown up in it and I love it and I know that it's really important. And so when I was unemployed, I did some education stuff. I helped out a couple buddies, just sort of train younger geologists on how to kind of do things. And I advised on some things. And then eventually got a phone call from a group who was looking for a geologist. And I went over there. It's a private equity bank. And they said, well, you're great. And I said, I have a project that I'm actually really curious about pursuing. I found this prospect. I really would like to go develop it. Is that something you guys would be interested in funding? So I sort of tripped into founding my company, the previous one, not this most recent one, but I kind of accidentally did it. And I always knew, I apparently told one of my buddies when I was in grad school, one day I want to own my own oil company. And all of a sudden I turned around and, ownership wise, I was a very, very small owner because the bank was backing us. But I still managed to self-actualize, which was a really important step for me in my career. I have just massive amounts of imposter syndrome, so I never really acknowledged that or let myself think about it. But it was a huge deal to be able to go out on a limb in front of this group of people I'd never really met before and say, I have this idea. This is what it is. You come back 2 weeks later, give a presentation, come back 2 weeks later, bring the new team, start to build the company. And to have this group of people say, we love this idea, we think you can do it, here's a bunch of money to go and try it. I mean, that's a really big deal. And it was wonderful and so fun. I've never learned so much in my entire life. I mean, talk about a learning curve.
So at that point, kind of that pinnacle.
Yeah.
Were you, did you just swim in the joy?
No,
or
not.
Were you instantly like, okay, on to the next thing?
I was instantly on to the next thing. It was totally overwhelming. I have, a few gray hairs and they all came from that day, that period of days. It was very stressful. I was closing our deal, getting my funding. It was my birthday. My best friend got engaged all within 2 days in the same year. And, I'd done none of those things before. I mean, except for my birthday, but it was a really hard time, actually. I reflect back on it and I wish that I had taken a little bit of time to really understand what had happened and really feel good about what had happened. But I never let myself have that break. I just kept going because the well needed to get drilled. We needed to get all of our vendors paid. We needed to hire people. We needed to do all these things. And so I never stopped, just go, 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 go. And in retrospect, I wish I'd given myself just a little bit of leeway, a little grace to have that moment of, wow, look what you did. This is amazing. So just pushed forward and ran the company for a couple of years. And there were some issues. Of course, COVID came up. So that was a whole thing. And, when you put a bunch of 35-year-olds, 4 35-year-old guys and 1 35-year-old gal in a room and say you're all C-suite, there's going to be some problems. So it was really, I look back on it with a mixed set of emotions, but I'm very proud of myself. I'm proud of my team. I'm proud of all of us for doing what we did. And I'm really glad that I'm not doing it anymore because it was really stressful and I was constantly thinking about it, which is kind of what led to, my divorce. I was just in it all the time. And it was so hard for me to turn my brain off because there was constantly something that, some fire that needed to be put out. And so I'm sitting there, trying to watch TV with Luke, my ex-husband, and I'm still thinking about work, and that's not a really very healthy way to live either. So I learned a bunch, but I also learned about kind of work-life balance and how to actually parse time out to really turn my brain off from work. So
did you, once you're at that C-level, did you say, hey, I need some boundaries?
I'm terrible at boundaries.
Don't email me after 5. Don't. Nope. But no, you're getting texts and emails and phone calls.
Yeah. And part of it is oil and gas. It's a 24-hour thing, especially in operations. Once the well was drilled and once we had completed the well and put it online, it was less stressful. For sure, but it was still hard for me to set those boundaries. And actually, so my ex and I are still very close, and he came over for dinner a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about it. And I actually said, he complimented me. He said, "You've clearly done a really good job of establishing boundaries in your new role," because I actually do. I don't turn my phone off, but I'll put it in the other room, and I'll chill out and focus on the person that I'm with. I've been working a lot on presence. It's been a huge change and it's hard to do that. We get addicted to these little machines that are in our hands. And especially when we are driven, competitive people, it's hard not to be constantly checking the phone and dealing with emails and putting fires out. Just set it down, take a break. And I feel so much better mentally because I'm doing that now. I still work at weird hours. I woke up at 2 a.m. the other day and was I'll just send this email.
Would you consider yourself to be a futuristic minded person or is it difficult for you to enjoy kind of the presence in the now because you're thinking about, in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now? Totally.
Great question. A meditation coach I had talked about forward leaners and backward leaners, and forward leaners have a tendency to be more future driven and think about things that are way down the path and have a hard time being present. I've gotten a lot better at it, but yeah, totally what's going to happen tomorrow. My timeline has gotten a lot shorter. Now I'm more what's going to happen tomorrow. I used to be more like, what am I going to achieve in 5 years?
Right.
Where do I want to be in 5 years?
But COVID, I think, has changed everything. Is, the concept of the 5-year plan is like, I don't know what's going to happen next month.
Exactly.
I mean, there's really no way to know.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, the whole COVID thing, that was...
Yeah. So what else changed in your life during COVID?
Oh, man.
Well, also, you have to tell, you did share about your divorce, but you have to tell the story of the day that you guys decided.
Yeah. So Luke and I had been married for 7 years, and, I was having a hard time I was really detached because of work, and he was unhappy with that, and I was unhappy that he wasn't as supportive of my career. But there's no way to understand what someone's going through when they're founding a company, and that's why I think these conversations are hugely important.
And when they're passionate about their work, too.
Exactly. So it's hard for anyone to understand that. I get it. And Luke and I, we were great. Like I said, we're still friends. We just decided that we didn't want to be married anymore because, we're kind of like two strangers living in the same house, frankly. And I didn't like his shoes everywhere and, all those little classic marriage things. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I guess we're doing this. So we decided to get a divorce on Valentine's Day of 2020.
Wow.
I had gone to Austin for work. I bought a heart-shaped cake at Swedish Hill Bakery, which is our favorite bakery. I brought it home. And I set it on the table, and we started to have this conversation, and the conversation turned into, well, I guess we're going to get a divorce. But we were due at our best friend's house later that day for a Valentine's dinner. And so I cut the cake in half, like a broken heart. And we went over to our friend's house, and the older I get, the more I realize that if you're not leaning into the awkwardness, you're making it worse. So we really leaned into it. I took the cake over there and I presented it and I said, Happy Valentine's Day. It's actually a divorce cake. And our poor friend, I don't think he knew what to do with that. It was pretty awkward, actually. But it was like, what are you going to do? Valentine's Day, man. So COVID started off with a bang for me. We decided to get a divorce. COVID hit in March. I was actually on a girls' weekend in New Orleans when they started to announce that things were going to be shutting down. And we were wandering down Bourbon Street when the cops were coming down behind us saying, you all need to go home, get off the streets. There's an outbreak of coronavirus, blah, blah, blah. It was crazy. But I got back to the house and then I was literally trapped with my husband / soon-to-be ex-husband for a number of months. Meanwhile,
your roommate.
Oh my God, my roomie. Meanwhile, trying to continue to run Century, the company that I was, running, and that was challenging too. Oh my gosh, dealing with going from having an very, very in-person team to everyone working from home and like no boundaries. You can hear kids screaming in the background, and it was just really hard to figure out how to do all those things. And, I think it's challenging for people to understand what a CEO does. And I struggle with it all the time. I mean, half the time my job is just putting out fires, HR, holding people's hands to make sure that they're okay. Like, it's totally not what you think it's going to be. It's not glamorous at all.
It's hard to articulate. That's why it's really difficult to even update like your LinkedIn profile because you're wearing so many hats. I mean, I've done anything from plunging toilets to overseeing contractors to,
negotiations.
You name it, somebody's got to do it.
It's crazy. So, I think those things don't translate digitally either. So that was really challenging. There was some problems with my team, and we were a really good cohesive team for a long time, especially one of the other guys and I were very, very close. And things just started to really kind of unravel, and there was a lot of drama. And I think it would have happened anyway, but I think it was really exacerbated by COVID. I mean, I'm sitting there with my future ex-husband literally across the table from me, and I'm like, what is going on in my life? Like, holy crap, what happened? So it was a challenge. And then I started to go back into the office early because I didn't want to be at home.
Right.
And of course, Luke and I would always have conference calls at the same freaking time. So I'd have to go outside and he'd sit inside. It was just so challenging to manage that like transition. So COVID was rough. Yeah. And then we finally signed divorce papers, I think end of July. And I bought a house, which was awesome. Bought a house, an old house. It's 100 years old. And I had it completely renovated, which was like one of the coolest projects I've ever done in my life. Everybody told me I was going to have too much on my plate, but I needed that. I needed that like creative outlet because everything else in my life was totally falling apart in front of me. I needed to build something.
So did you find pictures on Pinterest of kind of how you wanted it to be?
It was amazing. Yeah,
that's what everybody does.
Yeah, I had a blast doing it. And so I found this really good contractor. He was recommended by a buddy of mine. And he did really good work and he was relatively cheap and he knew my situation and that, you know, at a certain point, even though Luke and I managed to make it through and still be buddies, there were, of course, conflicts along the way. Like he wanted me out of the house, but we had made this deal where if I buy this house and renovate it, I could stay at my old house. And so it got really tense for a little bit. And so the contractor did a great job. He turned it around and I ended up moving over there in November of last year. So finally moved out of my ex's house with full divorce in November last year. So it was weird. And then, of course, COVID's still going on, you know, it's crazy.
But we were talking about the marble countertops, how we both have marble countertops and they are
so terrible.
Oh, they're so beautiful and awful to maintain.
Yeah. I chose a few things. I don't have any children. I have a 15-year-old wiener dog. I'm single. And so there were a couple things that I was like, well, I'm a single gal. I can take care of this, like white marble countertops. Turns out you probably shouldn't ever do that. Like, why did I do that?
It's like owning a white t-shirt. It's like, why? Why? Who can maintain this?
No one. It's going to be stained in 2 seconds. Oh, so funny. But the house has been a total godsend. It's like a perfect Zen spot for me. I love spending time there. And it's just everything is how I want it. It's very like, I had the opportunity to really go through all my crap and get rid of everything.
Doesn't that feel good?
Working. Oh my gosh. Now I look around my house.
I love getting rid of my stuff. That's like the best feeling. I'm always like, oh, I want to live a minimalist lifestyle. And then I'm like, oh, I need this thing that does one thing. Let me buy it on Amazon. And then I'm like, why are you doing this? It's so awful.
Are you a Marie Kondo fan?
Honestly, no. I mean, I think she's great, but I tried to
do it.
No, I tried to watch the show and I just couldn't. I just couldn't get into it.
No, I didn't like the show either. I like the idea behind the method. I don't actually practice the method. If something I notice in the closet, I have a bag where if something is, I haven't been wearing it for 3 years, I'll just put it in the bag.
Got it.
And then like once a month or twice a month.
Because some people turn the hangers around.
Yeah, I've heard that. I just like know what I wear and know what I don't wear and what fits and doesn't. And if it's not working anymore, it goes to Goodwill.
I just let everything pile up until I'm like, everything feels so heavy. I'm sick of looking at all of this. And then I like gather up everything and give it to, you know, a resale shop. And then I'm like, oh my God, that feels so good.
It feels good. It's like a load has been lifted.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how my house feels it's some people come on. I've actually had, oddly enough, a lot of contractors or, you know, people, the guy who was hanging my blinds the other day said, your house has the most beautiful energy.
Oh, wow.
This is the blinds guy. I mean, it was amazing.
Well,
and I
blinds guy / energy expert.
Energy expert. Okay, so let's talk about that. When I walked into this house, the first thing I said, and it had been a rental for 10 years. So it was in pretty much disrepair when I walked in, hence gutting it and basically renovating the entire thing. I walked in and I was like, oh my God, the energy in this house is so amazing. I'm totally obsessed with it. This is my house. My realtor kind of looked at me and she was like, okay, whatever. So I start the renovation and I'm on the back porch one day and the neighbor's dad is out back walking around and he flags me down. He says, "Hey, come over here." So I go talk to him, and he says, "Do you freak out easily?" And I was like, oh God, what is this guy going to do? This is Houston, Texas. What is this weirdo up to? And I say no, because I don't really freak out easily. Like, sure, ghosts exist, whatever. Okay. You know, I watch scary movies all the time. They don't really faze me. And I'm like, no, not really. Why? And he says, a serial killer used to live in your house.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And at first I was like, who is this crazy mofo? Like, what is this guy doing? And he said, no, my daughter, your neighbor, Caitlin, is a therapist, and she has a book on the guy who used to live in your house. I'll bring it over for you later. And your neighbors across the street.
No, that's okay. Really?
Now I do freak out easily. Your neighbors across the street told me they'd lived there for 40 years, and the guy who used to live here was doing his killing when DNA evidence started to become a thing. And so he would go around to each neighbor's house and ask them, after he had murdered these girls, if he could shower at their houses so the DNA wouldn't be in his, now my house.
Yeah, because that's not weird.
Totally.
I always shower at my neighbors' houses.
Bizarre. And I was like, why didn't I hope the neighbors said no. So now I've asked them. They did say no. But so I find this all out, and I'm like, nah, this guy is total lunatic. Like, that's not right. So I go inside and, of course, begin the Google search, frantic, like, you know, this part of Houston, you know, who is this guy?
Gosh.
And so there's two guys in the Heights where I live who were serial killers. There was one called the Candyman, which most Texans know about.
Ooh.
And another one called the Tourniquet Killer, who was my guy. Yep. I still get mail for him sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he lived there. He murdered, I think, something like 5 or 6 girls, Latin women under the age of 20. Like, he had a whole thing, and he would use a tourniquet to kill them.
Oh my gosh.
So he is a named serial killer. It's totally bizarre. He did get the death penalty in 2018, so he's no longer here on this planet. So that's good. But man, so now my beautiful, great energy house is also a murderer's house. It's fine.
That's so wild that you guys both felt that your house has good energy. And then
bizarre.
Here comes the story.
Oh, it's so crazy, right?
Wow.
It was such a 2020 thing to happen, though. I mean, the whole time I was hearing this story, I was like, well, that checks out. That's a 2020 thing.
Well, I don't have a good segue from serial killer. No, I'm just kidding. So what are some important lessons that you've learned along the way?
Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned this before.
Other than to Google your address.
Google your address before you buy a home. At least none of the murders happened there.
Yeah.
I think that the most important thing that I've learned is like how to be myself. And that in being yourself and being authentic to yourself, you are able to achieve things that you didn't ever think were achievable. I mean, I think that's huge. It's taken me a long time to be comfortable enough in my own skin to know that, you know, whatever happens is going to happen. And if I can do it, it'll happen. And I get to have fun along the way and be myself. And I'm obviously a very, very serious person. I don't like laughter whatsoever. And so being in a role now where I really get to like lean into just being me has been super fun. It's been really exciting and nice, you know, and I'm learning a lot about marketing. That's pretty interesting too. We were talking at lunch about how important marketing really is. And you never really, I never thought about it, but it's really a science, you know, and I always knew that I was pretty good at quote unquote sales because a geologist who's trying to convince someone to go basically dig a 20,000 foot hole in the ground has to be a good salesperson. But it's been really interesting learning about marketing. And we were talking about how important it is to, you want to know how you're making people feel. And, you know, now that I run EnergyFunders, it's so important to make people feel comfortable with me. Because what we're doing is really technical and people are giving me their money, their hard-earned money, to put into a fund to then go drill oil and gas wells and put Bitcoin mines on natural gas wells. So like, that's a big deal for somebody to hand you a bunch of cash. We've been doing really well. And I think part of it is that I am a very open person. Like, I'm basically an open book, as you know, and
she is leaning forward.
But it's been really interesting to learn about marketing and how you make people feel it does have a direct impact on how you do in your job. It's really cool. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, from our talk, mm-hmm. I came from the nonprofit background, and as far as fundraising, I mean, it really is an art and a mm-hmm. science mm-hmm. together. And so as a geologist, of course, you have the data and the, mm-hmm. you know, the science, but the art of how do you make somebody feel compelled yes. and how do you know, what's the approach? Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
It is. It's really cool. And, you know, I, of course, did have quite a bit of self-doubt coming into this role. Can I raise funding? You know, I'd done it before in a totally different context. Like, getting private equity sponsorship is its own challenge. I had a relatively easy time doing it, but I think there were a number of reasons for that. And you know, basically it was, here's $100 million, one-stop shop. This is, we're crowdfunding this fund to get what we're trying to do is disrupt the energy investment space. So private equity or investing in a stock, like an energy stock, like an Exxon stock or something like that, the consumer, whoever's putting money into that is losing money because of all of these fees that are built into everything. And so, you know, the cost to have a team in private equity, they take 2% off the top, and then they take 20%, and then they take this, and then they take that. And so then if you're an investor, which we all should be, I think it's really important, especially for females, to be aware of how to invest and why investing is important and all those sorts of things.
I'm on Robinhood.
Good job. Yay. You're crushing it. But it's been really interesting kind of figuring out how to it's different to get money from, like you, for example, than it is from some investment banker who knows all these things and facts and can go fact check my background. Like, I don't have all day to explain to you why you should trust me. You just have to do it. Like that, it's sort of an interesting thing. And I think your experience in the nonprofit sector is actually hugely valuable. Like, I never really thought about my buddies who all work in nonprofits and how important fundraising is. And now it's all
storytelling. And that's what we were talking about, is being able to tell that story, mm-hmm. because that's what people can relate with. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted you to tell the story about, you know, deciding that you guys are getting divorced on Valentine's Day and cutting that cake in half, because that, I think our listeners will be able to resonate with that, of having this awful situation that's not supposed to happen on Valentine's Day, but by infusing humor into it to, you know, almost kind of make light of, you know, just to, because life's hard.
Life's hard, life's serious, and I can't be serious. I just do not possess the ability anymore to be serious. There's been so many heavy things that have happened over the past couple of years that I just can't. You know, why waste time? My glass has gone from half empty to half full in a period of a year.
So if our listeners want some more information about you and EnergyFunders, where can they find it?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm Laura P. Taters with a Z. I'm on LinkedIn under Laura Pommer. You can find EnergyFunders.com, has a ton of information on there. Read about our new fund that we're in the process of raising. I am on this podcast. You can call Courtney and ask. But yeah, I'm all over the internet. It's easy to find me. Marketing works.
That's right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the FoundHER Club, where women aren't just building a business, they are building themselves. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at FoundHER's Club. Or you could visit our website, foundhersclub.com. Send us any questions you have or recommendations for future podcast guests. Even better, you could spread the love by subscribing to the FoundHER's Club on iTunes. And if you really love us, leave us a 5-star review. This will help other listeners just like you find us. Now go share your magic with the world.